G'day guys, my name is Wildkard. Super Rugby Round 9, final game of the week. Western Force hosting the Waratahs at the Force Field in Perth. This was a really unfortunate game going into it. Western Force had 5 COVID cases and 5 of their starting players were not able to play, and they had to make a last minute change prior to the starting of the game to make up for the kickoff. So yeah, this was a really last minute shuffling, really kind of disruptive to the Western Force. Maybe that's why the Western Force came out of the gate looking shell shocked. But once the game settled down, the Western Force really kicked into a nice rhythm. They look really good despite the 5 changes to the team. So I would have to say that's a really big positive for the Western Force team. Managing that situation and pulling themselves out of the ditch, putting up a really good fight despite the adversity that they were facing. So Waratahs came out with a huge lead, quick start, 3 tries in less than 15 minutes, and a penalty goal. So the Western Force was really down and out, but the Force was able to get themselves back in the game. The Waratahs managed quite well, didn't fall apart or anything, had exceptionally good defense despite the Western Force pounding their defensive line for a huge extended period of time. There was one point in the first half where the Force had 26 phases, and before the Waratahs were able to turn the ball over. So it was ridiculous defensive effort. But yeah, I thought the Western Force did really well to come back from the ditch that they were given at the beginning of the game. See, the Western Force, despite having some of the core players like Jeremy Thrush, their hooker, and Jeremy Thrush is the lock, and their starting hooker, I think it was the Wallabies reserve guy. What's his name? Anyway, so the Western Force has like the key players missing in their 4-pack. They were still able to put up a really good maul against the Waratahs with Michael Hooper, some of the starting Wallabies players in the team, and able to get really nice set pieces in the scrummaging as well. So not really falling behind in any of those parts despite their missing key players. The biggest highlight from the Western Force is Mataele, who every time he got the ball was just super threatening, breaking over the advantage line almost every time. And yeah, he was quite a weapon, and the Western Force utilized him quite well. He was able to get quite a lot of yardage. I think he has the highest average run meters per game in the competition at the moment. So incredibly impressive, Mataele for the Western Force. And then the Waratahs, the Hooper obviously returned full time this week for the first time this year. He had a half game last 2 weeks ago, and then this was the first time he's back. And his combination with Gamble was a pretty good 6 and 7 combination. Gamble, actually, I thought Gamble was way better at the breakdown than Hooper. Hooper, like the workhorse, was much better around the park, making those tackles, doing those high work rate stuff that is known to be good at. Gamble, however, was also doing incredibly well with his work rate, and that precision and the breakdown from Gamble was really impressive. He was doing better than Hooper, was able to get a lot of those turnovers, forcing over a lot of those penalties to stifle the Western Force getting points on the board, especially in the first half. The Waratahs number 10, Edmund, kind of stepped in the 10 role really well, actually. He was doing really good. His passes was pretty good. I thought, who was it before that was injured? But yeah, he's kind of stepped into the role quite. Yeah, you wouldn't think that he didn't have a start prior to only a few weeks ago, right? He was really impressive stuff, really good accurate passes, set up a few good tries with his play making, and this was I would say thumbs up to Edmund. And so overall, the Western Force, I would say, probably, if I had to criticize a little bit, whilst their attack looked really good, their utilization of Mataele and the spaced out wide, and also using that kind of screen running and the loop running to create space kind of behind behind their own line and then using the space out wide. I thought that was really good, but it starts to get really predictable and one dimensional after a while. So the Western Force attack patterns kind of just staled after a few phases. They were doing pretty much the same move again and again and again and again and again, relentlessly for the entire game. Even when at times when they were inside the Waratahs half, getting those penalties inside those 22-meter zone, could have taken the advantage and kicked maybe opted for a kick for maybe to try to open up the defense a little bit against the Waratahs. And no, they didn't do any of that. I don't think there was a single kick, a grabber kick or like a high ball kick behind, especially when there was advantage being played for them. Not a single kick was made this game. There was one point, in fact, they had an advantage and they carried on like crashing the ball, running their, running the set play. Like I said, I think it was 26 phases. They lost the advantage for like not using it for too long. And I thought that was probably a situation where they could have just, got to put a bit of grabber behind and reset after after hitting the brick wall for so long. The Waratahs defense was literally a brick wall as well. It was exceptionally well organized and well defended this game. So overall, the Waratahs scored 6 tries to the Western Force 4. And if you look at the stats, right, the Western Force has exceptionally better stats than the Waratahs. 414 run meters to the Waratahs 278. 137 carries to the Waratahs 56. Like more than double the carry run amount over the Waratahs. And still, 4 tries to 6, 41 points to 24, still quite far behind despite those numbers. And that is what I was talking about. They had opportunities to attack and they just one-dimensional attack patterns, rinse and repeat for so many phases, for like literally days. And it was predictable and become easily defended by the Waratahs essentially. So if you look at the tackle count, 184 for the Waratahs, only 14 missed tackles. That is world-class performance there by the Waratahs. 75 tackles for the Western Force, 10 missed tackles. And as you can see that so many tackles were made and the Western Force barely able to make any breaks in the defense because the attacks was too predictable. Like I said, look at this. Kicks in play. 9 kicks in play out of 15. Last game we saw earlier today in the New Zealand side between the Hurricanes and the Highlanders, there was like 36 to 28 kicks. Like this is, not even half the team kicking account. Like both teams combined is less than one of the teams that the New Zealand teams kicked just one game earlier, right? So again, the Western Force probably should have utilized a little bit more kicking, especially when the attack pattern becomes too predictable and stales out the game a little bit. Lineouts lost 1 apiece, pretty even overall. 2 scrums lost for the Western Force. The Waratahs definitely had a scrum advantage in this game. Was really able to put the screw on against the Western Force, and maybe the COVID changes showed a bit of an issue there against the Western Force there. Definitely the scrummaging was a big issue. Penalties count, 12 penalties apiece. The Western Force was leading the penalty count at half time. Western Force was only considered 2 penalties at half time, and the Waratahs considered 7. So the Western Force penalty count really ballooned in the second half, and yellow cards. 1 yellow card against the Western Force and 2 yellow cards towards the end of the game when the game was kind of like out of reach for the Waratahs, with repeated penalties under pressure. So yeah, 2 penalties, 2 yellow cards against the Waratahs, 1 against the Western Force. And that's kind of like how the game played out. I do have to say Angus Garner's performance in this game, it's a little bit below his normal standards. He's really good. But this game, there was a few, I thought 4 passes that was missed. There was a few, I guess, not questionable. I would say, yeah, there was a few little errors in his call today. Like one of the advantages that the Western Force was playing, he literally had a full-on penalty advantage, and the Western Force gained like 10 meters, and he called it an advantage over. So I thought maybe it was a little bit off today, but overall, still a rather solid performance by Gardner. So let's quickly go through the tries, I guess. So right off the start, the Western Force was looking struggling with the scrummaging, but the Waratahs was kind of like on the defense in the beginning of the game. The Western Force were trying to make their play. Nawa Kinna Tawasi reads the play perfectly, intercepts the ball, runs full length, 70 meters down the field for the first try for the Waratahs. And then like a few minutes later, the Flecky gets a nice try for himself. Basically, there was a nice little screen run. The number 10, Edmund gets the ball. He slips through a nice little gap, offloads to Flecky. Flecky runs in for the second try for the Waratahs. On the 14th minute, so only less than 5 minutes later, the Waratahs were on the offense. Really quick ball coming out of the breakdown. The Western Force looked like they were just all over the place. It was people were just like pointing at each other, not really sure where everybody should be. Hooper looks up, sees a massive open gap by the Rucks. No one was committed to the ruck. He picks up the ball, runs in for an easy third try for the Waratahs. After this, the first 15 minutes of flurry, it was looking like it was going to be really bad for the Western Force, but the Force stabilizes the situation, and you started to think that maybe the 5 changes was really going to lead this game to a blowout, but no, the Western Force stabilizes the situation, gets a try on the ball just under the 20th minute. They basically force a penalty, sets a penalty out for a line out more. The ball comes out, a nice little loop behind by Mataele, just suddenly finds himself in basically a nice little gap open. He kind of loops around from the blind side. So suddenly the open side, center field opens up because no one was expecting him to come around. He gets the ball, runs through, and then just before he's about to get tackled, he gets pretty close to the try line. He offloads to Pasi Tawa, who runs in, slams the ball over the try line for the first try for the Western Force. He emphatically claims that one. After that, so this was on the 19th minute. After that, for the remainder 20 minutes, the Western Force pounded the Waratahs. They were in the Waratahs 22 meter for like 8 minutes or something ridiculous amount of time was inside the Waratahs 22 and was not able to score any points. So Waratahs defense was really good. Western Force relentless in their attack, and was really, really unfortunate to not able to come up with any points. So at halftime, the score was 7 points to 24, despite the Western Force really dominated the last 20 minutes of the first half. The score is looking pretty dire. Second half starts. The Waratahs kind of comes out in a bit of flurry, but Western Force able to stabilize, gets himself in the front foot. Western Force gets a penalty. They kick the penalty out for a more, goes for a line out more, obviously. There was a bit of a messy ball coming out of lineouts, and Anstey kind of gets the ball out of the back of the messy Moore, sees the line in front of him, goes in for the first try in the second half of the Western Force. The Waratahs strikes back with Parecki with their own Moore. So basically a few minutes later, Waratahs gave the Western Force a sense of medicine, kicks the ball out, sets up a Moore, goes in for their first try in the second half. Parecki gets this one for the Waratahs. And then Western Force hits right back on the 55 minutes later. Again, with a Moore. Another really, really well set up Moore by the Western Force. Just almost textbook. This one was a lot better than the first one that they just scored in the second half. It was much tidier and much more structured. On the 63rd minute, the Western Force gets a yellow card. One of their players, Pasi Tawa, placed the ball on the ground. Look a bit hard done by, but the referee says that he was cynically playing the ball on the ground. Yellow card. And then after the yellow card, the scrum really started to show more for the Waratahs. Basically, they had a scrum instead of going for a line out. They knew there was a player advantage, so the Waratahs goes for a scrum. The ball comes out. The Edmund gets the ball, throws the ball out wide to Newson, and this was just because there was just too many numbers. Out wide goes in nice and easy on for a try without even being touched. Essentially, Waratahs pulls himself ahead 36 points to 19. It's starting to look like the Waratahs running our way now. They're doing a lot of really nice run, nice attack. There was literally like 2 minutes later, Waratahs gets the ball inside their own, basically inside their own 40. They decide to run the ball. One of the players, I think it was Edmund, finds himself a little half break, and before he gets tackled, offloads the ball, and that opens up a massive gap for the Waratahs. I think it was, who was it that received the ball? Might it be? I think it was. I think it was Gordon. I think it was Jake Gordon who received the offload. He kind of runs through a bit, links up with Newsom out wide, and Newsom runs in for the 6th try for the Waratahs. Easy as that. And yeah, Western Force like suddenly looking like they're falling apart a little bit at this point. But then the Western Force, again, just like they did in the first half, finished the game strong. Not able to get in reach to win the game, but they finished strong. Put a lot of faces against the Waratahs in the last 15 minutes or so. Waratahs got 2 yellow cards for giving away repeated penalties under pressure during this period. On the 75th minute, finally the Western Force, having 2-player advantage, gets a try. They go for a scrum. This scrum was good against the Waratahs because they're missing a person. Ball comes out, just one pass out wide to Pasitoa. Way too much space, just runs easily like that in for the 4th try for the Western Force. And that's the game. That's the way the game ended. Western Force 4 tries, denies the Waratahs a bonus point, which was quite important. And Waratahs winning this game, showing definitely big improvements from the start of the season. Western Force, really, really good effort, given what the situation that they were given going into this game. Still, a lot of work needs to be done for the Western Force if they wanted to get into that top 8, coming up against the Kiwi teams next week. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching this video. I do appreciate it. Like, comment, and subscribe. Please subscribe. It really helps out the channel a lot. And thanks for being here. I'll see you guys next week for the news. Cheers.